Welcome to Leading Out Loud with Dr. Chantell, the podcast where we amplify authentic voices, bold ideas, and real impact in education. I'm a K-12 CTO, education consultant, and proud forever learner. And I believe leadership gets better when we share what works, what's hard, and what's possible. So let's dive into stories and strategies from the leaders shaping the future of schools, one conversation at a time. Hi, today we are fortunate to be talking with one of my oldest edtech friends, Matt Miller. And we were just talking before we started recording about how we met.
So, oh man, this was all the way back in 2013. And you and I were hitting up some of the little regional edtech conferences that were all around the state of Indiana. And I was doing a presentation about podcasting in the classroom. And so when you mentioned this, I started looking it up, and I still have the little handout file that I made of, the resources and how you could record it on Audacity and some of the different activities you could do. And it was back in the day when I didn't have a whole lot of technology available to me. You didn't have a whole lot of technology available to you. And we were just kind of getting started. And it's, it's the world has come a long way in the last 12 years, hasn't it?
Oh my gosh, it sure has, Matt. And I just want to share, we're old ed tech friends, but really I can really credit Matt with reigniting my passion for education. I'd had a rough year. I had just changed school districts that year. I had a baby that year, and I had given up teaching French. I was only teaching English. There wasn't technology, and I was just feeling like the burnout was imminent, right? And I was like, And I went to this session, and I heard Matt speak, and I was like, all right, come on, Chantell, let's get back to the drawing board. If he can do this, you can do this too. You're not in it alone. And our students deserve it, right? You've not met Matt Miller. He's probably best known for Ditch That Textbook, a book and a blog that encourages educators to break free from traditional ways. And even though your journey started in the traditional ways, you've really veered off from that. And today I want to talk to him a little bit about what it means to be a leader through that disruption that we went through in 2013 and the years after, how AI has disrupted things, and also how to stay grounded while embracing all of that change in education. And hopefully you might give us a sneak peek on what you think the future of AI might look like for teachers and students. So let's get started.
Yeah.
So like I said, Matt, you're best known for ditching the textbook, but what did that first real disruption, what was the first thing that you did with your students in your classroom that you were like, this is it, I'm ditching the textbook?
Yeah, I actually remember very specifically when it happened. So it was there was a day in my high school Spanish classes at North Vermilion High School in Cayuga, Indiana in 2006. So this was in 2006 that this happened. I've been teaching for just a couple of years. And I was teaching very, very traditionally, full load of high school Spanish classes, straight out of the textbook, marching chapter by chapter through the textbook, trying to cover the whole thing in the year, worksheets, workbook pages, all of that stuff. And after teaching that way for those first couple of years, I started to realize something about my students. It was almost like a little secret that my students and I had that nobody else really realized. And the secret was that the students in my high school Spanish classes couldn't speak Spanish. Yeah. So after I realized that, there was a day not too long that was kind of like my aha moment. And then there was a day not too long after that I had just gotten done giving this riveting lecture for 20 or 30 minutes on reflexive verbs, I think. I mean, my students were so excited about it. I'm not. And then at the end of class, I very graciously give them 5 minutes to work on their homework. And guess what? Nobody was working on their homework. Nobody was interested in working on their homework. And so I very confidently went up and was like, oh, so you're not working on your homework, huh? That must mean you got it all done and I didn't give you enough. So I'm going to assign you some more. And so I gave them more homework because they weren't working on it. The bell rang and my students sprinted out the door. As fast as they could get their human legs out the door, they got out that door. And I remember standing in that room and I was like, something is wrong here. I'm trying to do everything the way that I was taught when I was in high school. And I'm trying to do all the things that I see my fellow colleagues, my teachers in my building doing. and it is not working, and I'm not enjoying it, and they're not enjoying it. This is not what teaching is supposed to be about. And that was like the spark that got me to start trying some new things, So after that, it was really just a lot of, you're talking about disruption here. It was time to disrupt a system that looked like the status quo, but it was not getting me the results that I wanted. And so I just started trying stuff. I thought, for heaven's sake, babies can acquire a new language and they don't do verb conjugation drills like I'm making my kids do. So I started trying, using some technology. I started using some storytelling to get my students repetition. We started playing games. We started doing projects. So, just like all of this stuff that was not the stuff out of the textbook, until little by little by little by little, I started going, why do I even have these textbooks around anymore? So it wasn't like I think textbooks are evil. It was just they weren't getting me the results that I wanted, all of the stuff that was in them. And I started trying other stuff to the point that I just was able to ditch my textbook. That's what the disruption looked like at the beginning for me.
You kind of hit on this earlier, but the education system really values tradition, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think that makes it different for you and me? What do you think it actually takes for a teacher or a leader to really embrace that disruptive mindset?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of like what you were talking about, and it really plays back to what I was talking about from my own classroom. I think you've got to look at what works. I think this is especially true in the ed tech world that you and I have kind of spent a bunch of time in, because sometimes schools and teachers get the cart before the horse and they start to think about, technology is innovative and it's cutting edge. And I used to think this too, by the way. I'm no different. In my Spanish classes, I remember one time we had the rolling laptop cart, the great big, like heavy as a tank. You got to push it down the hall. You're trying not to run kids over or slam it into a door or something. I got it into my room, and all of these laptops and all of these little portable battery chargers, they're all sitting on the desks and the students are all working. And I remember sitting there and crossing my arms and looking across that room. And I was like, look how innovative I am. But then I started thinking about the activities that they were doing on it. And it was really no different than digital worksheets on laptops. The work had not changed, and I still got the same crummy results. And so I think when you're asking, if you want to embrace a disruptive mindset, I think you've got to be crystal clear on where do you want to go, and what are some things I can try to get there. I think for me, that was the big thing, that I was sick of being complicit with a system that wasn't doing what the students needed just because it looked like the same thing that teachers had done for ages. And I think it was just like that little fed up feeling that I had inside of me that really sparked it. And then it became sort of like just like a problem solving puzzle of, here's the end goal. This is what I want. This one route we've been using, it doesn't get me there. There is a closed road in the middle somewhere. There's a roadblock in the middle that will not get us to the finish line. So what's another route that I can take? And just, trying those other routes and learning about them little by little. It's kind of like whenever I do keynote speeches, sometimes I talk about how being a teacher is kind of like being a scientist. Being a scientist, because you work through the scientific method. You make a hypothesis and you test it out, and then you look at the results. And if it didn't turn out the way that you wanted, it's not a failure if you've learned something from it and you can use it to do better next time. So, that's when you're talking about that disruptive mindset, I think that's sort of at the heart of it.
So next I want to shift to talk about the elephant in the server room, right? AI.
Did you say the elephant in the server room? I love that. That's so true.
Like, AI is here. It has appeared out of nowhere. So you've embraced AI as an ed tech leader.
Yeah.
What would you say to educators and school administrators, district administrators who feel like the pace of change is just too much, too fast? I still know lots of districts where people are burying their heads in the sand and pretending it's like they're closing their ears. La, 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 la. It's not happening.
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Yeah. So if they're saying too much, too fast, I'm going to give you an answer that might surprise you. I would say, I think so too. I'm going to go there for just a second.
Sure.
I'm going to turn it around in a little bit, but I'm going to go there first. That, first of all, we have this technology that has really just sort of taken off at a feverish pace since, what was it, November 2022, I think, when ChatGPT was released to the world. And so many of us, it's like, oh, wow, AI isn't science fiction anymore in those dystopian novels and movies. It's like, it's actually here. And I think we're still trying to figure out what it's capable of, what it does well, what our role should be as humans, what we should keep sacred to preserve our humanity. Like all of those things, we're still trying to figure them out. And I think there are definitely some applications of AI where it's very, very helpful. For instance, that we've had sort of a teacher burnout crisis. You were talking about it earlier, right? Like the teacher burnout crisis is not new. It's not getting better. And if we don't provide some solutions, we're going to continue to hemorrhage really great teachers. And so if we can use AI to speed up some of our work in an ethical, responsible way, if we can do that, if we can get some new ideas, if we can breathe a little bit of creativity into our work that we didn't have before, that gives us life and inspiration to get out of bed in the morning and go teach, like that's huge. But I would also say, on the other hand, for the ones that say it's too much too fast, it sort of is, in that, we're asking students sometimes to use these AI tools and they're unpredictable. They are unlike the software and apps that we've always had throughout the existence of this technology, because, software has been predictable. Apps have been predictable to this point. Large language models and the diffusion models that make images, and so many of these other AI models are not based on predictability. And education kind of needs some predictability in some ways to make sure that we're not teaching kids that cows have 5 legs instead of 4 because of that one picture that we saw. And so, yeah, I think we need to temper things, but we also can't do what you were just alluding to earlier, which is stick our heads in the sand and pretend that it doesn't exist. I think we need to move forward, but we need to move forward slowly and cautiously. And I think we've got to keep the main thing, making sure that what we're using it for and what we're doing is improving instruction and is doing right by students, instead of just trying to cram a square technology peg into a round hole.
Today in your work, you work a lot with school districts or large groups of educators. What small shifts have you seen that groups of educators or school districts can make that lead to big results in changing the culture around innovation?
Oh, there's so many things that I can say about this. I will honestly say one of the big things, and I've even seen this in my own teaching, one small shift comes directly from the top, I think. Which would be like building administrators and, of course, school district leadership and everything too. And that is like encouraging innovation. Because, what happens with us as teachers is, one of the first things, and this goes all the way back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like we feel that need for like safety and security. And so if we do something that we think is going to put our job in jeopardy or our standing in the district in jeopardy, then we don't want to do that, because we want to make sure that we're safe. And so I think one of the things we can do from the very top is encourage teachers to do what's right by students by, I don't want to say like any means necessary, but practically by any means necessary, by the right means, And so, whenever that message is clearly communicated from the top, and when it's backed up by action too, whenever you have teachers that are trying things and they think that it's in the best interest of students and it doesn't go over so well, but the teachers are like, but I think I'm making progress. I think I'm learning something. I'm seeing a little glimmer of hope out of this. I just got to keep working at it. And I think we're going to be there. When you see that leadership has your back on all of that stuff. Like, again, small shift. It's not something that's going to take a ton of time. It doesn't take a ton of resources, doesn't take any money. It is just kind of like a trust factor that comes from the top that says, I trust my good teachers to do what's right by students and to come up with those solutions. And when teachers feel that way, then all of a sudden, you know, the creativity floodgates start to open. I think there's even brain research that talks about, it's like your amygdala, right? Your amygdala is like your lizard brain. It's like where the fight or flight comes from, where if you're scared of something, then you go into kind of like panic mode because of your amygdala. And it has to do with, you know, safety and security. It's like, you know, ages and ages and ages ago, when you hear a rustling in the leaves and you're afraid it's a saber-toothed tiger that's going to eat you alive. You know, that's kind of where we've come to today. And it still sort of exists in us, only now the saber-toothed tiger is the pink slip or the riff, or, you know, whatever it is. So anyway, that's coming from the top, I think. And then, you know, on the teacher side of it too, if you want to go down there, it's sort of the same thing for them. It's like, you know, what's a small shift? It's the small shift of, let's try something new. Let's try something different. And not just getting kind of like stuck into the same old routine. If you asked me tomorrow, I would probably have a completely different answer to this question. But today that's the thing, is that I think, especially top down, if you want to get big results, you've got to trust your teachers and they've got to see it. You can't just talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk.
So you've leaned into generative AI with your most recent book. And tell me how that connects. How does that build a bridge from your original ditching that textbook philosophy and then bringing that into AI?
Oh yeah, I think it all connects. You know, so I wrote Ditch That Textbook. Again, I alluded to this earlier, not because I think textbooks are evil or people shouldn't use them or anything, but it was just sort of like that mindset that if you stick to the status quo and you do the same thing, right, that everybody's always done before and it's not getting results, then it's time to try something else. And now, you know, we're in this world where it seems like there's, you know, more and more AI being integrated into the tools that we're using. The workforce is starting to use it more, and it's become this sort of like inevitable reality that we've got to reckon with, and our students are reckoning with, even as students. But then, of course, when they get out into the workforce, it's going to be a part of their lives too. So really, it's that whole idea of, I mean, the metaphor fits right along with, you know, like the student is assigned an essay and they do the prompt and paste. You know, they copy the assignment, they put it into Chat GPT, they copy it into a document and they paste it and they submit it. And the teachers are so frustrated about it. And now I'm going, well, this is the same thing. This is, we're trying what we've done before and it isn't getting the results that we want. So now it's time to try something else. And so, you know, for the last couple of years, as teachers have started to learn what generative AI is, what all of the different types of AI are, and I think we're finally starting to get over the hump that AI isn't just a cheating tool.
Yes.
You know, I think we're making progress on that, but I think we also have to lean into the reality that there are ways that AI can stunt our students' growth and development and learning if it's not used responsibly. It's just like, again, it's just like so many other technologies and so many other, you know, fads in education and initiatives and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think that with AI, we're going to have to do that same thing, not necessarily throw out when you hear ditch that textbook, you think that means like throwing stuff out. And I don't think we necessarily have to throw out all the things that we do and just teach with AI and just teach kids about AI. But it definitely means that we have to adapt. Kind of like I did with my Spanish classes, you know, I didn't quit on the standards and the curriculum.
Right.
What I did was I approached them differently to get better results for the sake of my students. And I think we are definitely in a day and age right now with generative AI where there's all of this disruption. We were talking about disruption earlier, weren't we? Where there's this disruption where we need to lean into that idea of, if we're not getting the results that we want now, let's try something else.
And I see a lot of district leaders, and a lot of district leaders, even technology directors, might embrace AI themselves, but they're very cautious
Yeah.
about AI in classrooms, right?
Yeah.
That's way too scary. It's a big risk. It can be a big risk. Where should they start if there's some of those district leaders who are just really worried and they haven't really begun their journey yet? What advice would you give them to get started?
Okay, I got a few things.
Sure.
Number one, if they're still sort of nervous about this and when they want to know where to start, I would say go try using some of these AI tools yourself. But using them doesn't mean that you agree that they're the best. It doesn't mean that you have finally come over to the dark side or whatever. It just means that you want to learn how they work. You want to see it with your own two eyes, and you want to put your fingers on the keyboard and you want to see what they actually do. I really love the advice from Ethan Mollick in his book, Co-Intelligence, that's all about artificial intelligence. And he says, people often ask him, is there a course that I should take? Is there a book that I should read or something? And he says, the best way to learn what generative AI is capable of is 10 hours of practice with it.
Oh,
doesn't have to be 10 hours at a time, of course, but like if you commit to trying different things, once you have a cumulative 10 hours of practice with a generative AI tool like ChatGPT or something like that, you start to get a pretty clear idea of the basics of what it can do and everything. So I think if they're looking for places to start, that's definitely one. The next step that I might suggest is to start talking to teachers and students. And just have kind of like open, like grant with the kids, you'll be like, I'm granting you immunity from all of the things. I just want to have a real honest conversation here and just start talking about, how have you used it? How has it been beneficial? What are your fears? What are your concerns? Stuff like that. And you start to hear what the students are saying. You start to hear what the teachers are saying. It's going to start to like open your eyes to things. I think a couple of other things you do, you start to see where the trends are headed, where, what are the projections of how it's going to affect the workforce, of where the AI technology is going to go and everything. Ethan Mollick jokes that when you do your 10 hours with generative AI, you usually come up also with 2 sleepless nights. He says after 10 hours and 2 sleepless nights, you're there, because those 2 sleepless nights are when you start to realize what it's capable of. And you start to go, oh my gosh, it's going to be able to do this and this and this. So I think there's that. And then the last thing that I would say too is be very judicious about any AI tools that you want to adopt for the school or the school district. Read through the terms of service, try them out yourselves. Really ask lots of questions before you get into a big contract. And then really with all of that too, figure out how is it going to be used? How is it going to make things better? Sometimes I think people, especially like in Indiana right now, we have the digital learning grant. Yes. And I adore the digital learning grant. I think it's great. But I fear that sometimes some schools are like, look, there's all of this money here. If we put in an application, we can get that money and we can use it. And I'm like, have you stopped to think about what you're going to do with the product that you get if you get all of that money? And I don't think everybody always thinks that through.
No.
And again, it goes back to, let's talk to the teachers and let's talk to the students and let's see, what do we need help with? What do we need something to do? It's kind of like the woodworker who wants to sculpt like a beautiful clock out of wood or something, and they go out and they buy a chainsaw, and you're like, why did you buy a chainsaw? I got a really good deal on it. That chainsaw isn't going to help you make that beautiful clock unless you're going to cut a tree down and make it out of that wood. Anyway, sorry, you got me on my soapbox there.
Yeah.
A little bit. I have lots of things obviously to tell these folks about where to start.
Well, but that's why I wanted to ask you the question exactly, because I knew you'd have lots of advice. So I want to tell you, my district has received digital learning grants in the past. We were one of the first AI powered platform grants in Indiana. They offered an AI powered platform grant to school districts 2 Augusts ago now, almost. And it was a quick turnaround, and I was like, okay, we need to jump on something. Who are we going to start with? Where are we going to start? And curriculum and technology sat down And we decided, we kind of took an off beaten path. We bought one tool and we decided we weren't going to focus it on high school or middle school like most of our other districts around us. We wanted to focus at grades 3, 4, and 5. And we wanted to do that because we were heavily focused on early literacy and its impact as we come out of COVID and there's learning loss, and that's a focus. But also, how can we embed digital citizenship lessons right alongside the use of the AI tools? Because we probably already have high school and maybe even some middle school students who are seeing AI as, oh, it's an easy way out. It's a way to cheat. And we do need to work on changing those mindsets with digital citizenship lessons, of course. But if we can start early, where we also have an academic need that we believe AI might help, how can we change mindsets then to show them that this is just another tool in their toolbox as they try to, continue their learning and continue to be successful? And, honestly, it was probably a little too early in the whole grand scheme of AI in schools. A lot of the platforms that had student-facing AI weren't really ready for prime time yet, in my opinion, at that time. And it was messy and it didn't take off the way we kind of thought it would flourish. So we took a step back and we applied for the digital learning grant the following year, but we didn't focus on AI. Instead we dug into what does the district really need? And we ended up with a year's worth of professional learning for our district and for our leaders around universal design for learning. And how can we change the way we provide lessons and assessments and learning to students using the UDL principles. And then this year we applied okay, now that we've done all of that learning and we're incorporating that, what AI tool can we bring on?
And I'm glad you brought that up because I think that shows that there's got to be a balance too, because if we if we go on the wrong on one side of this spectrum and we say, I'm not going to jump into, I'm not going to purchase a tool, I'm not going to apply for a grant or whatever until I find the perfect thing. Then we start to miss out on opportunities as well. But if we err on the side of, oh, there's all of this money, let's just go get something. That's messy too, But then also in the same vein, we need early innovators like you. Like your district that's willing to jump in and try things. Just mention that you guys took a little bit of a step back because it wasn't doing what you wanted. That's a perfect example of that. You kept using the term disruptors mindset, right? That's a perfect example of that, of how we need a disruption, but we're starting to see that the disruption that we picked at first isn't doing exactly what we need. And so now let's take a step back and let's go back to the drawing board and let's kind of rethink it, but we're not going to stop disrupting.
Right.
We're just going to take a step back and reevaluate this one particular decision. I love that. I love that approach.
So what's one thing you wish more school or district leaders understood about innovation right now? I kind of talked about that shiny tool syndrome. I'm being left out if everyone's buying this particular platform. We need that platform too. What do you think that they need to understand?
Oh, that's such a big question.
It is. Right?
There's so many different directions that you could go with this. I think one thing to know is that even if you're all about innovation and you want to try new things and you want your teachers to try new things, and even if they feel empowered, like I was talking about earlier, that they feel safe to try new things, sometimes it's hard for teachers to envision what innovation looks like. It's hard for them to picture, how could I do things different? I think sometimes some teachers get into, we'll call it a routine instead of the status quo or the rut. Those have kind of a negative connotation. We'll call it the routine. They get into the routine and they're getting some results, but they just have a hard time picturing, well, how would I even do this differently? It's just, I really think innovation, creativity, all of that stuff, it's a muscle that you develop over time to be able to, have disparate views of things and to be able to envision things differently than they are. And if that's not a skill set that you've developed over time, it's hard for you to think of. So I think I want more school and district leaders to know that if teachers are resistant to change, it doesn't mean that they won't change. They can't envision it. Or I think they're worried about the negative consequences of what if I change and it doesn't go well. You know, if
Sure.
we lower the bar a little bit on innovation, and it's not like, let's set it way up here and let's completely revolutionize education, but it's like, just in a little way, let's start small. You know,
Mhm.
I think if we understood that small steps are good steps, and that's how we build momentum, you know, with all of our teaching core, you'll have some of your go-getters that'll want to innovate at higher levels, and you know what? Let them do it.
Mhm.
But if we can just push for little small steps, little changes, and then reflection afterwards, I think that's how you build that muscle little by little by little. So if you just jump right in the deep end with a cannonball with a great big splash and you go, let's go innovate, it's going to rub some folks the wrong way because they just haven't developed that muscle.
So, Matt, if you could go back to that first big disruption, that aha moment and your
Yeah.
journey that began there, what is one piece of advice that you would offer yourself back then?
I would probably tell myself back then that just because you've seen other people teach a certain way doesn't mean you have to do it that way yourself.
Mm.
And that there are lots of ways to teach. I think I
Mhm.
was afraid of changing because I saw so many people doing the same thing. And it wasn't necessarily because it got the best results or
Mhm.
because we were mandated to do it that way. It's just because everybody kind of does what everybody else does. And I wish that I had known for that, you know, maybe I would have made that big leap earlier on if someone had just said, hey, Matt, you don't have to do this. If it's not working for you and you think there might be a better way, it's okay. Try something else. I mean, you know, there's that often quoted phrase that if you do the same thing over and over and over again and get the same results, it's called insanity, right?
Yes.
It's like that's kind of what I was doing. I was trying the same stuff over and over again. It still wasn't working, and I was hoping that it was going to get better results because that's just what everybody did. So I think that's the thing that I wish I had. And I know that for me, I was in a very privileged situation where I had a school and a district and leadership that wasn't going to crack down on me for trying different things.
Mhm.
And what I also was not doing was, like I said earlier, I wasn't going rogue against the curriculum or the standards. I was still teaching the things that I was
Mhm.
supposed to teach. But I also know that I was in a very fortunate situation where I had some freedom to try some of those things. And I know not everybody does. So I would even
Yeah.
say they're like, innovate in small ways.
Mhm.
Innovate with the way that you ask questions. Innovate with
Mhm.
the way that you provide students feedback. Innovate with like one little tiny teaching practice within the day and slowly grow those wins up into something bigger. So if you fear that, you know, you're going to get cracked down on if you ditch your textbooks, well, then maybe don't start by ditching your I didn't even start by ditching my
Right.
textbook. You
Yeah.
know, I started with some of those small things. And when I started to see some successes, it continued to grow.
Do you have a funny, humbling, maybe wildly unexpected story from the work that you've done, either in the early days of ditching the textbook or even today experimenting with AI and some of the work you do with large groups of educators and districts?
Yeah. So when I was teaching high school Spanish and I was starting to develop my conversational speaking, you know, like teaching skills, I was
Mhm.
trying to, you know, teach through conversation and storytelling and all of that stuff. And it involved some kind of like making things up on the fly. It was almost like improv some
Mhm.
days. And there were times where I would like draw a little something on the board to illustrate a story, or I would just make a little comment off to the side or something. And the students would like roar with laughter because I had just inadvertently said something inappropriate. You know, I'll give you an example. Okay. I
Yes.
won't go into specifics with this, but I
Sure.
will say that there was one time we were talking about a character in one of the stories who
Mhm.
had a pencil, a writing pencil, writing utensil, and it had a little eraser on top of it that was cherries. And I drew it, and let's just say it resembled, you got it, didn't you? It
You totally got it.
resembled some of those pictures that boys draw in the, you know, the stalls in the bathrooms. And then the kids just roared. And it's like, instead of, I think the lesson that I eventually learned out of that was I don't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to do the best that I can do, and I'm going to make
Mhm.
mistakes sometimes. And if I see that, it's like, let's just admit to the reality that we
Mhm.
all see. We all see it. I can laugh about it. It's like an experience. It's a moment that we all have, that we all can share together. And
Mhm.
I wish someone would have told. I was just like mortified
Oh,
when I
I'm
drew
sure.
that pencil with the cherry eraser on it, and I just wanted to crawl into a hole. I just felt so dumb. And now today, if I had done it, I would have just laughed alongside him. I would have erased the pencil and the eraser, and we would have moved on with our day. And it would have been a great story that I would have told in the teachers' lounge at lunch.
And I think so many educators can relate to that. We've all had that moment, like you don't realize what you're doing. The students all start laughing. You're like, oh no. And we probably all react the same way. It takes several of those moments to get to where you can tell the story in the teacher's lounge, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much. What a gift to sit down with you today. You're someone that I've known for a long time, admired for a long time, but you don't just talk about innovation, you really do live out innovation in your work.
Well, I appreciate you having me on as a guest. And I've just got to say, I'm thrilled that you're making this podcast, because the experience that you've had and your honesty and your wit and your, solutions that you can provide to people and all of that stuff. It's just, it's each one of these episodes that you're going to put out is a gift that you're going to get to give to educators. And I'm just thrilled for the education community to be able to get this. So if folks don't know about this podcast, they need to know about it, and they need to start subscribing, because it's going to be great if it's coming from you. So thank you so much for having me on as your first guest.
Thanks for joining me on Leading Out Loud. If today's conversation sparked an idea, made you smile, or reminded you that your voice matters, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, share, or leave a quick review. And remember, your leadership deserves the mic, your story deserves the spotlight, and learning should always come with a little laughter. Catch you next time.